way and what not to do and what you're going to have problems with, and and it's true. It's kind of like reading the book where your kid's growing up, and they're going to start dropping things off the edge of the high chair because they like to see them disappear and they like to see you chase them. Well, this is that kind of a book. You're going to run into, and you do. We took about 6 months and put a plan together, and took that plan back to City Council and said, "This is what we want to do. Is it okay?" And they said, "Yeah, go ahead." Of course, they give us any money and so on. But we followed that plan very, very closely. And I would encourage you to get a relatively small group. I don't think it needs to be a large group together to try to form a nucleus of trying to come up with the mechanics of what you might do. But an early part of that was to do several things. One, and I brought several copies, this was a questionnaire that we put out to the community. We ended up with about 500 responses. Most of them were electronic through SurveyMonkey, which you may be familiar with. It's a real nice tool to put a easy to do survey together. And then we also printed, just from their questionnaire, printed a bunch of copies and put a bunch of little cardboard boxes around town at various locations to collect for those folks that didn't feel comfortable doing it online. We ended up collecting about 500 surveys, which is actually quite good for my background in statistics. I was guessing we might get 300, and when we got 500, I was amazed.
Yeah, one found out an interesting place to put the collection boxes was barber shops. Where you have time and they're always talking about something and they're mad about something. And we didn't separate the responses from the barber shops to the rest of them, but it was interesting where they came from.
What's the population?
Population of Buckhannon officially inside city limits was is about 5,800, I believe. But
in session, the school.
Yeah, well, that's not really counting. School will be another 1,000. But early on, one of the things we did was to form about a 40-member group of citizens that would be our community response to the project. So one of the first things we did was take an early draft of the questionnaire, and they said there's a problem with it. It's trying to define just Buckhannon. This needs to be a community survey. And said, okay, we'll take that response back. We reformed it, expanded the questions, didn't try to restrict it so much to residents, although we do ask on here whether or not where you work and where do you live, inside the city limits, near the city, in the county more than 5 miles from the city, and so on. So we tried to gather some of that data, but we spent quite a bit of time analyzing it. I brought a copy that just happened to be in the files of some of the analysis that we came out. We also gave a similar survey to the college students. Theirs was totally online. We also gave a survey at the high school to all the high school students. And it was, again, similar but more oriented towards their kinds of interests and concern. The college only turned out about 100 responses, but the high school turned out 1,000 responses because they were ordered to take it in the room. But all three groups basically said the same thing. I mean, there was not a significant difference among age groups or any other way that we divided up the results. We ended up putting all the data back into the computer so that we could work with it that way. But so, one thing I would say is I think you need it, and maybe you already have, you need to get a real good on-the-record feedback from the community, what they like, what they don't like, what works, what doesn't work. So you can kind of get a pulse of where you're at now. And that really didn't take that long. It took us maybe a lot longer to argue about what questions were in there and what questions wouldn't be in there and so on. But I would encourage that as a first step. And as part of that first step, I would form some kind of a broader group than this that are not involved in the day-to-day. Our group only met 3 times. We met on Saturday mornings, usually starting about 9 or 9:30. Told them we'll be done before noon. You know, we furnished them some treats. We found somebody that would host the meeting and provide them a little food. We divided them up into teams. We had very specific activities we wanted to accomplish that day. And then we were done, and we didn't meet again for another several months. And then the next phase, we brought them back in, you know, what's this look like? Sometimes we sent materials out to them ahead of time. But that was very good, to me, both the response from the questionnaire, the response from the Community Action Committee, helped bring a larger and larger view of what it should be and what it should be like. We were then more processors of information than we were generators of information.
Yeah, and through the course of all this, you know, we were meeting, this working group we called ourselves, was meeting on a weekly basis, every Thursday at 5, and recycling what's been going on and gathering this information and putting it in